Walking poles are extremely useful. Everyone knows the advantages of them if you use them. They can shed the weight, they allow you to look up and see the view, but they also have a third function which people who use a single pole type shelter such as a teepee tent like the Hex Peak or the Mini Peak or the WickiUp or the old Go Light Shangria series, as well as a few of the American structures, know that if you can convert your walking pole into a single tent pole, a good, solid, strong, reliable one, you are in fact taking an additional item. So at Backpacking Light there are a range of 3 different linking sections which link different diameter poles together. And I thought I'd do this video to try and break down and help with some of the confusion about which section will work with which pole, because as we know, there are lots of different types of poles coming from different types of manufacturers, but they sort of fall into certain categories. So in front of me here, I've got 3 pairs of poles. The first section nearest to me here is the Mountain King Expedition poles. Now these are what I'd call the standard width of poles, the standard diameter, and that is 18mm diameter at the top, 16mm diameter in the middle and 14mm diameter at the bottom. Next to these we have the Leki Makalu carbon poles. This particular pole is the next size down. This is what I'd call the slimline version. You've got the standard version, then you have the slimline version. And this one is 16mm at the top, 14mm at the bottom, and in the middle, and 12mm at the bottom. Now obviously these are Twistlock poles. They have Twistlock sections in them to tighten them. So you twist it to tighten, obviously, to get the pole the right length for you. The other type of pole are the Flicklock variation, and as luck would have it, there are various ones of these available. Now the Flicklock poles I've got in front of me are the Leki poles, and they are 16mm at the top, 12mm in the middle, and 14mm in the middle and 12mm at the bottom. Now, which linking section fits which pole? So let's start with what I class to be the easy one. So taking the Mountain King, as I say, the standard thickness pole, the standard diameter pole, we have 18mm, as I say, 16mm in the middle and 14mm at the bottom. Now this is fairly easy in the sense that the twist to take the bottom section out, and if you take the magenta, yes, there you go, get the right one as well. The magenta walking pole, that's the walking pole extension with the 2 twist locks at the bottom there, that is 14mm in diameter, and that will naturally replace the 14mm lower section. And you simply slide it in as you would do any of the walking pole section, past the safety element, give it a twist, and you therefore have a linking section there. So now you can have your pair of poles with the 18mm and the 16mm here, and likewise at the other end you'd have the same as well. The 14 links them together, you have the 16 and then the 18mm, and you have a nice strong stable support. So that is the one for, shall we say, the standard pole. Right, now the slim pole is the opposite. So the Twistlock slim poles, which as I say are 16mm, 14mm and 12mm. Now the linking section for those is the 16mm tube. There you go, the 16mm tube there. And that one, because it's a tube, naturally replaces the handle. So you take the handle section off this Twistlock, take that off there, you have the tube, slide that into the tube, past the natural safety point, give it a twist, and once again you're starting with the tip there at 12, then you have 14mm, then you have 16mm, and then you have 14mm and 12mm for the other end. Now of course that would leave you with a pole which has a tip at both ends. Now in some poles, for example the pacer poles, they come in 2 different types of flavours. The carbon pacer pole is the same diameter as these slimmer poles. So if you were using a carbon pacer pole and wanted to use that as your single tent support, then the 16mm section would be ideal because you would be left with a tip at both ends. Obviously that slots into the ground nicely, and at the other end you create some sort of protector, or you put the rubber ferrule on at the tip and then something else perhaps to protect your shelter. Unfortunately, with the standard pacer poles, they would be the ones that end up with the 14mm extension, which would then result in a pair of handles at both ends, a handle on the ground and a handle at the top of the shelter, which unfortunately means that it can obviously distort the handle or distort the shelter because it's quite an unusual shape and doesn't sit in the natural curve of the material. So keep that in mind. If you're lucky enough to have the carbon pacer poles, then the 16mm will work a treat for you. Now, coming on to the Twistlock poles. These are a different kettle of fish altogether because obviously the system they're based on is the pole is the same diameter throughout virtually, and the pole then pops into the grip there and the grip compresses over the pole. Now, as I say, these Leki ones are the slimline versions. So once again, their dimensions are 16mm, 14mm in the center, let's just show you that, 14mm there, and 12mm at the bottom. And of course it's tapered as well. So the ideal linking section for that is something that we call the missing link, which is this one here. Now the other two are obviously tubular alloy, whereas this is a tube, but it does have, I think, a 3 or a 4mm wall, which makes it very, very strong indeed. And it's been designed so it is slightly tapered as well. So providing you go past this little indent here and lock onto there, the pole as it stands, as it comes off, once the 12mm is removed, should just slide down there, slot into place, get stiff, and then you just lock it tight like that. And that makes for a very, very, very strong and reliable connection linking section. So once again, you'd have your pair of poles, which would be the 16mm here, the 14mm there, and the 12mm, which would link them both together. Then you go back up to 14mm and 16mm to give you a very strong support for your shelter. To add to the confusion, which is where it starts to get a little bit confusing, there are poles on the market which may be two-section poles, and they might be 16 and 14mm, or they might be 18 and 16mm if they're two-section. Sometimes there are four-section poles which are 18, 16, 12, 14, 12mm. You can see where it all links together. Now, we do not have a 12mm linking section, so 12mm Twistlock linking section. So that's the Twistlock expander there, that won't fit. The only one that is available is the one that slides there into the flick lock. That's a 12mm. The reason I mentioned about the confusion is that if you have a pair of poles which are of the wider variety, so in other words, the top of the pole is 18, 16 and 14, the 14mm Twistlock section, the 14mm Twistlock, will fit inside the 16mm flick lock. And I'll give you an example of that because, as I say, this pole is 16, 14, 12. So if I remove the bottom two sections, then obviously this section, which is 14mm, should slot into the 16mm and using the twist system will lock tight. It doesn't really matter about this, about the flick lock. Now I can't guarantee that's going to work on all poles, so that's 14mm going into 16 on the flick lock poles because everyone is slightly different internally. However, it's worth a try if you want to get an extender that will link the poles together. Right, let's try and break that down on screen because I'm sure it's equally confusing, and I will do my best to go through the details and put the dimensions up to try and make it a bit clearer. So the classic pole, the standard pole, the 18, 16, 14 Twistlock pole just requires the 14mm Twistlock extender, the magenta one. The slimline poles, the 16mm, 14mm, 12mm at the tip, requires the blue 16mm tube, which replaces the handle section. So you twist lock or remove the handle section, and the two lower sections are linked to the other pole's two lower sections using the 16mm tube. Coming on to the flick lock poles, particularly most flick lock poles seem to fall at the moment into that category of 16mm at the top, 14mm at the middle and 12mm at the bottom. So the 12mm bronze coloured extension will slide into replace the bottom section and lock into place easily. If, however, you have wider poles that are flick lock poles, which are 18mm at the top, 16mm in the middle and 14mm at the bottom, you should be able to use the magenta twist lock to replace the lower section, and we'll twist and just lock it into place. Okay, so I know you've got one particular question. How do you measure the diameter of the pole? It actually isn't as difficult as you might think. The simplest way is to tear off a small strip of paper. Fold one end of the paper back on itself to create a straight line. Wrap the paper around the top of the pole. That is the top of the solid part of the pole, not the expander or the plastic attachment. Wrap it round, and then with your thumb rub hard where the wrapped piece of paper overlaps the folded piece of paper, which will create a little crease. If you then unfold it, lie it flat on the table, get out a small ruler and measure the width between the crease and the folded section, you will get an indication of the diameter of the pole. And I've put those on screen for you now to look at. So very, very briefly, if it measured around 38mm, it's a 12mm diameter pole you just measured. If it's 44mm, it's a 14mm pole you just measured. And if it's about 50mm at the gap, then it's a 16mm pole you've just measured. Now that's nice and simple. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, press the subscribe button up in the corner and join us for future releases. Or better still, pop along to the Outdoor Station website. A link is just below, and you can put some feedback in any comments there. And we can also let you know directly when we've released some new material and some of the exciting developments coming soon for outdoors people everywhere. Thanks for watching.